Thanks everyone else for coming along and sharing in this wonderful initiative. And I just have to pay tribute to Vin for her amazing amount of work in getting this to happen. This is the second lot, of course, and it's just proving to be a wonderful connection between our colleagues in ASEAN nations and ourselves. It's been a really wonderful process, and thank you, Vin.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thanks, Bill.
So we have two sessions today. Podcasting to increase student engagement with Mark, Sophia and Bridget, and followed by developing the digital competencies of teachers through DigComp Edu framework, facilitating learners' digital competence with Hoti Mailin. So to start us off, Mark Shelton, Sophia Holmes and Dr. Bridget Morrison will be discussing podcasting. I had a little bit of inside knowledge about this one, so I've had to listen to the podcast and they're extremely good. So I think we're in for a bit of a treat this afternoon. Mark is a teaching fellow and unit coordinator at University College. He teaches into the associate degree of applied technologies. Sophia also is a teaching fellow in the associate degree of applied design. And Bridget is a well-regarded natural resource management advisor in Tasmania. And it's wonderful to welcome all of you today, and we're looking forward eagerly to hearing your session. So I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill, and thank you, Vin, and for everyone for attending today. So as we've mentioned, my name's Mark Shelton, and along with Sophia Holmes and Bridget Morrison, who I'll throw to introduce themselves in a moment, we're here to talk to you about podcasting to increase student engagement and talk to you about the experiences that we've had in the very recent past about applying podcasting to some of our unit content to try and engage students at the end of COVID. So I'll pass over to Sophia just to quickly introduce herself so you know who we're talking to today.
Sure. So as Mark and Bill both alluded to, I am Sophia and I work as a teaching fellow within the applied design qualification. And I also work as a professional designer when I am not here at UTAS.
Bridget?
And I'm the course coordinator for the associate degree, undergrad cert and diplomas in applied technologies in University College, College of Business and Economics.
So the first thing we wanted to do is to provide an acknowledgement to country, but we wanted to highlight the history, the very long history of the incredible use of narrative storytelling for educational purposes amongst our First Nations people, to try and tie the acknowledgement into the topic that we're discussing today. And an example that we found while researching podcasting relates to Indigenous stories that talk of dramatic sea levels and how much they rose, that took place across different parts of Australia more than 7,000 years ago. So research conducted by marine geographer Patrick Nunn and linguist Nicholas Reid, they found that 21 of stories from different parts of Australia accurately record these events. So if you think about that for a second, 7,000 years ago, these flood events occurred. So that means that somewhere in the vicinity of about 300 generations of people have successfully passed down stories through oral storytelling traditions, alongside campfires like the one you see in the image there, without the facts fundamentally changing at some point. So I think, you know, and Sophia will talk a bit later on about some of the barriers that our peers raised with us about podcasting. They suggested that perhaps, you know, listening to stories and retelling stories might not necessarily be the most effective approach to education, but I think that's a really good example of the tremendous impact that narrative storytelling's had on our First Nations people. So we just wanted to start with that acknowledgement to tie that into our topic today. So the problem we were faced with. I'll throw to Bridget for this, but before I do that, I just wanted to quickly sort of outline the approach that we're taking to the presentation today. Very much aligns with the way that we structured our podcast, and we'll talk more about the structure a bit later on. But it was very much about having myself as the host and throwing to the industry experts, so in this instance, Sophia and Bridget, to get their thoughts and feedback. One of the things that we wanted to achieve was to have a really conversational nature to our podcast, and we wanted to carry that into this presentation today. So I'll certainly go through some of the research that we've uncovered, but we really do want to, have that discussion and that conversational element to the presentation, because that was a really key part to our podcast. So some of the student feedback that we received that we'll discuss later on highlighted. So Bridget, my first question to you was, what triggered this? Why did we start making podcasts in the first place? What was the catalyst for all of this action?
Okay. It's important, I think, before we go into that, to set the scene a little bit, Mark, because that really is what led our thinking. So we were really in the height of COVID-19 and the lockdowns, not so much in Tasmania, but certainly in other areas of the country. And at that point in time, the government had announced and released the undergraduate certificates as an initiative to get people that were in lockdown situations doing something active, and they were considered to be work-ready certificates that people could use once they were out of lockdown. So we were right in the throes of that. We went from having about 20 or 30 enrolments to around 300 to 400 enrolments in a very short period of time. We were slowly working toward getting all of our teaching and learning onto fully online, because we do a lot of cybersecurity is the main thrust of the course. And so we had students all around the country wanting to do the course, and so we had to go online anyway. So, but COVID really accelerated how we had to progress that. So we got into the fully online delivery of this relatively new unit, which is designing for technology and innovation, and first year unit, core in the degree and undergrad cert. And we found that in that unit, engagement was really low, really low. So students could attend the tutorials, which were recorded, and it was compulsory for them to engage in the tutorials in some way. So they could attend or they could watch the recording. And the Milo data showed us that we were really only getting about 30% of students actually watching the tutorial recordings, and who can blame them? Watching a tutorial recording is a little bit dull. So what they were missing out on, and we could tell this through the assessment tasks, getting material in assessment tasks, and you could just see that students weren't engaging in the material. They weren't using discipline-specific language that you would normally see them start to develop in those first year kind of units. And they were missing opportunities like bumping into one another in the hallway and talking about the particular unit or the topic. And so that was the problem that we were dealing with. And all three of us and our colleagues were all complaining about pretty similar things.
And I think if you have a look at some of the research that's come out, Bridget, it's no wonder that students weren't able to attend some of those webinars. The first thing that we learned after digging into this problem a bit deeper is that 95% of our particular cohort were mature aged. And therefore the assumption, that we're sort of making with that is that they're juggling things like paid work, child and caregiving responsibilities as well. So the opportunity to sit down at very designated times to attend those live webinars was very challenging. And it didn't matter what time of day. And we tried everything, didn't we? We tried during the day, during the evenings, all sorts of different things. We could never get that critical mass there. And some of those impacts, and there's some research by Sorella, identified that disproportionately affects the ability for women to return to study too. So all of our students are now working in jobs more than ever as a result of things like the financial crisis that we currently find ourselves in. 86%, recent research shows 86% of Australian students are working while studying, and that's up 15% from 71% in 2021. So in such a short period of time, that's a big jump in the amount of people that are engaged in paid work. So they're very time poor, and their ability to put aside time to attend live or to listen to recorded webinars was pretty limited. And perhaps most concerningly is that the number one cause of stress for those people, for those students, is balancing that study with external responsibilities. So they know that they need to get to those webinars. They know they're missing out on learning opportunities, and they know that their studies are suffering as a result. But the reality is they just can't take time off work. They have to work in order to stay afloat. And I mean, as of July 1st in Australia, international students can now work 48 hours per fortnight, which is up from 40, which, on one hand is a good thing. It means that they've got more of an opportunity to make enough money to pay for rent and food, groceries and things of that nature. But the reality is that's 8 hours less that they've got to undertake study as well. So this is something that's impacting all of our students, and the research clearly shows that. And certainly anecdotally, we're hearing this from our students pretty extensively as well. So the other thing that the research showed us is that the end result of all of that is that we have to think differently. We have to think about ways that we can provide engaging content to people that they can access in a time and in a manner that suits them. So we don't want them to miss out on those learning opportunities, but we want to give them that accessibility that they don't currently have with those live webinar structures, which is what led us to our solution. We wanted to take the learning to them. We wanted to meet our students where they're at. We wanted to align ourselves with those adult learning principles of meeting the students where they're at. And some of these numbers I found quite staggering. 78% of Australians are listening to online audio monthly. So online audio can certainly mean podcasting, but other forms of online audio as well. 40% listen to a podcast at least once a month. Australia's now overtaken the United States in relation to podcast listenership. So we are just behind Sweden as the most avid podcast listening nation on the planet. So that is something to be excited about, Bill. But I think it's crazy for us to not, leverage off these different media, resources that our students are using in their everyday lives. It's something that clearly we find as a society to be engaging and something that we choose to do. So why not use it for educational content as well? And weekly podcast listeners spend an average of 7 hours per week tuning in. So when you think about that, if you combine that with the information that we gathered about the fact that everyone's really time poor and people have got all of these different responsibilities that they're trying to juggle on a daily basis, the reason that podcasting is still so popular is due to the accessibility and portable nature of podcasting. You can pick up a podcast and you can listen to it when you're at the gym or while you're on your way to work or on your way to school, and you can incorporate that into your busy everyday lives. So I just wanted to throw to Sophia, who is our design expert. It's great to have a resident design expert. She did help me with these slides today that were looking a bit patchy. So I don't know whether we're calling this minimalist or what's going on, Sophia, but thank you for your assistance with that. But I wanted to throw to Sophia to talk about the design framework that we used in order to make sure that these podcasts were going to be effective. So what was it that we wanted to consider, Sophia? How did we approach it?
Well, first of all, Mark, you and I both sat down and we came up with a list of our favourite podcasts. And then we kind of spitballed, discussed what it was about them and why we loved listening to them, and we kept coming back. And the number one thing was that they were conversational, they were warm and engaging, and we felt like we were sitting on the couch or around the dining table with these people. It wasn't that they were talking down to us, or they weren't coming from, it wasn't cold and staged and well rehearsed. It was really informal and really conversational. So that was definitely the number one thing. The next kind of thing that we really looked at from a pedagogical point of view was the value of case studies and how they were really important to contextualize that information for our students. So both Bridget and I took case studies from our professional practice, and then Mark would play the student, and he would ask question and answer style questions, and we would unpack concepts and terms, giving the students, the listeners, a window into how the tools they were learning were actually applied in the real world. The other thing, and Bridget's going to unpack this a little further, is with the limitations of our students getting out and talking or interviewing people, we chose to interview each other for one of the assessments. I'm going to stop there so Bridget still has something to talk about. But the ability to take a case study that you're either incredibly well informed about, or it's from your own professional practice, and retelling it, being able to throw those funny little anecdotes in to make it engaging, is a lot simpler than having to sit down and document and write and create this content in a more formal way. And it's so easy to do when it is that question and answer style engagement, where you lose track and you wander off on a bit of a story, and then Mark would come back in and ask a really great question, or he'd pick up on a nuance, and then it gave me an opportunity to really unpack that. So that really forms that kind of design framework where we looked at. So it's conversational, we really focused on case studies, and we made sure that it was engaging and it had elements of humor, all those different things. And obviously, I think the other thing, and it comes back to that conversational, is your voice and your enthusiasm and your inflection. You're not just reading a PowerPoint. And that's
it was incredibly important, wasn't it? And I think from my perspective, my ability to be able to spend just a short period of time with you and to gather all of that really important industry expertise that you had, and to be able to, give that to the students, as opposed to you having to sit there and write, reams and reams of content about it. The amount of information that we could gather from you and that they could learn from it's so much easier, and so much more engaging for us too, I dare to say.
Absolutely.
So that was the framework that we used. And based on that, Bridget also had a pretty exciting and interesting idea. We wanted to really test this and see how far we could take it. We started to use podcasts as a case study as well. So Bridget, do you just want to explain, how we went about that and sort of the outcomes from that as well?
Yeah, sure. So remembering, of course, that we were in the peak of COVID, and most of our students, being New South Wales and Victoria, were in the peak of their lockdowns. And so we had an assessment task, which was a design thinking exercise. And we wondered how we were going to get students to do the kind of empathy mapping using interview and survey techniques when they were locked down and in their houses. And because they were first year students, not having the skills and experience to be able to adapt. So we decided that we would instead do a podcast with Mark and Sophia and myself, talking about our experience of teaching and learning in the online environment. And the design brief was that students needed to develop a technological solution to support and improve the online learning experience. And so we sat down, did a podcast and talked about the challenges in teaching and learning, but also the challenges that we experienced at home ourselves. And so students were then able to interrogate that podcast and extract from it the information that they needed for empathy mapping the stakeholders. So we were the stakeholders, and they use that. I think it went for about 15 minutes, was it? 15-minute podcast, and the results were pretty extraordinary. I think there were 300 students. So in the end, we had to mark 300 maps of what our personalities and our challenges and needs were.
Our favourite toasted sandwiches, I think.
Our favourite toasted sandwiches. I think one student thought that I was a 65-year-old woman living at home with her elderly son. I don't know how that works, but anyway. But by and large, yeah, it was a great experience for us, but also the students got a huge amount out of it. So it solved a problem for us, but we were stunned at the outcomes of it.
And I think that was evidenced in the fact that, you know, of all of the, I think I marked a third of those assignments, and only one of the students, because they had an option to go down the written path or the podcasting path, only one of those students chose to use the written case studies. The rest of them chose the podcasting. So I think that, you know, that told a pretty compelling tale, didn't it? Mm. The feedback that you'll see on the screen now, this actually came to us very accidentally. One of our peers who had the same cohort of students for a completely different unit was talking to her students one evening during a Zoom session. And at the end of the session, she just asked for a bit of feedback about what it is that she could do differently. She was, you know, engaging in some really good feedback circles with her students, and they brought up the topic of the podcast from our unit to talk to her about it. So these are actually responses from our students, but they weren't in any way sought by us. They came very accidentally, which I think, you know, helps us to get a really good understanding of what they really felt, because the students, when they started to make these comments, you know, weren't talking to us specifically. They just were having a bit of a discussion. So as you can see, there's lots of different stuff about the accessibility of podcasting. So they can listen while they've got the kids. It's easier than tutorials or reading the content. And it's also about the content itself. So, you know, those comments about experiencing the decision-making and thought processes as if you're in industry. I think that was a really interesting comment. And how things work in the real world. It showed that we could really get that industry context from Sophia, and she could explain how design thinking is applied. So that was really pleasing for us to receive. And, you know, although we had less than a third of the students showing up to the webinars originally, we had over 80% of our students were listening to the podcast at least once. So that, again, in and of itself, the numbers tell a pretty interesting story. And not only that, they listened to the second episode and the third and the fourth and the fifth. They continued to listen as we progressed through, which was quite good as well.
And I think the other thing, Mark, is that one of the things, you know, really strong feedback that we got was that students felt like they got to know us. And that's, you know, I don't know about you guys, but when I was at university, I loved getting to know my lecturers, and that was all, you know, you get to know them and understand what motivates them and a bit of their personality. We lose that in the online, you know,
that's right.
Sometimes it's a little bit of performance art, whereas this was, you know, where they start to feel that they get to know us. That's a really good thing, I think.
It was great, wasn't it? So we were all very excited. The three of us were all very excited with how this was tracking, and we decided to take this to a group of our peers in our small team in University College. And Sophia, do you want to give us a bit of a rundown of how that went?
So we took it to our small discipline team, super excited to share it. And we're talking about 30-ish, give or take, 25, 30 of our peers. So they've all been through the same situation. They're all teaching a similar type of cohort. And the resistance really kind of shocked us. you can see some of the comments up on the screen, and what we decided to do is we had a half-hour session, and we literally showed them how to, using their smartphone, how to record. So that we set them up in pairs, how one person could interview another, so one staff member interviewing another staff member, and then sending that to Mark, and then Mark with, I think it was about 10 minutes, Mark, how he could edit it, adjust the audio, splice it all together, and create a podcast. And I think the thing is that podcasting is free. There are highly accessible tools like Audacity and YouTube Studio that make it so simple. Our view is that it doesn't replace content, but it is viewed as an additional, and it provides extra opportunities for students to engage, and it supports different learning styles. And I think one of the things, as Bridget kind of unpacked right at the beginning, was that our engagement was really low. And, it was hitting around that 30% mark, but the podcasts consistently were in the 80s. People were tuning in and listening, and not just once, multiple times. I listen to it on my drive to work. I listen to it when I'm cooking. If I'm looking after the kids, I can have one ear in, and then I go away and I Google what you've said and I look up the links. So it was really, really effective use of our time. And the equipment, like we dismantled that. You just need a smartphone. They won't listen. They absolutely will listen. The tech skills, you don't need tech skills. It's quicker to record a podcast than it is to sit down and write. I think one of the stats that was given to me, and I'm totally making this up, so don't quote me, anyone, but 1 minute of talking is the equivalent of about an A4 page of writing. So when you start thinking about that, the value of verbal feedback and the value of podcasts just blows you away. You can prep in bullet points, and then you speak. You unpack it like you're talking to someone. Yeah.
Thanks, Sophia. It was quite a shock to us. But as you say, we did, try to overcome those logistical challenges. I was invited by a peer to teach a group of their students how to record, edit, publish, and interview each other within 30 minutes. So that teacher decided to use that as an assessment task, which I thought was really interesting and really exciting. And it gave their students an opportunity to present their knowledge in a different way, and which they relished the opportunity. And as Sophia mentioned, also we repeated the experiment with a group of perhaps not as tech savvy staff, but we did get through it, and we did create a podcast in a very short period of time. And there are a number of invaluable resources out there now. The technology is improving so rapidly. Audacity, as Sophia mentioned, is open source free editing software. You can find some amazing resources on YouTube to teach you how to use it. But we're certainly happy to help if anyone does want to head down that path. So Audacity for both yourself and also for your students, if you want to get them to create their own podcast, the ability to have a good professional standard bit of software that you can get them to put onto their computer and even use it web-based is such an important thing for accessibility. YouTube Studio is where we find all the free backing music and sound effects to add that real texture to the podcasts. One of the things that you do want to try and create is a bit of an atmosphere when you're creating your podcast, and that can be incorporated really simply. And YouTube Studio has heaps of good free royalty-free music and sound effects. And the latest thing that I found is actually another wonderful tool. It's one of those. There's positives and negatives in relation to AI, but Adobe Podcast is a beta version of a program that provides AI audio recording and editing tools. And the one tool that I found really good takes quite patchy audio that you might have recorded on a phone and cleans it right up. So you basically upload the audio that you've recorded on your phone, and it can make it sound like you've recorded it using a professional studio. Again, totally free, takes very limited amount of time. So it can help your students to create even more polished work, or yourself, if you're out in the field, you know, on some sort of excursion, you can record audio, or you can record an interview with an industry expert. And even if the quality of the audio isn't that great, you can use tools like Adobe Podcast to clean that right up in a very simple manner. You upload your MP4 and it gives it back to you about 20 minutes later, nice and clean. So AI used for the powers of good. Also, you know, we're just starting to unpack, and this is something that you know, I've begun to do some more research on in recent times, because it's not just an accessibility and a simplicity tool. Podcasting, I think, has some really incredible uses in relation to universal design for learning. There's research, you know, about providing audio centered in conjunction with traditional materials, of course, to cater for the spectrum of dyslexic needs. We certainly developed audio transcripts for each of our podcasts. That's incredibly simple to do as well. So we made sure that the podcasts that we created were accessible for those who did have issues with auditory content. And some other research that we found from universities in South Africa when we were doing a bit of a literature review showed that the students who found podcasting most useful in that South African context were mature age students whose first language wasn't English. And some of the other data from that particular bit of research showed that those students with English as an additional language were listening to podcasts in excess of 3 times. So they were really finding it a great way to understand about conversational English. And in the recent months, I've started to try to teach myself German using an app on the phone. And I find the written stuff to be absolutely useless. But when I can listen to the podcasts in German, I'm having certainly much better results. And it's given me a newfound appreciation for all of my students who have English as an additional language. To be studying at a university level in your second language is a phenomenal achievement. So I think podcasting has a really important part to play. It's not the whole solution to the problem, but it has a really important part to play in developing that conversational English as well. What's next for us? Look, we're running out of time quickly, but I'll just throw back to Bridget and Sophia for their last thoughts. Bridget, in relation to research potential, is there anything that's you know, excited you about podcasting in that space?
Yep. I think it would be really great if we could investigate the actual impact of this kind of value add. You know, we keep saying it's not going to replace content. It's not going to replace a lecture, all of those formal learning activities that we would expect. However, it's clear to us that there is an impact from it. We'd really like to be able to measure that in some way, and in that way we can then continuously improve. And so we're interested to know if anybody has any methods that they would recommend to us, or want to participate in that with us. That would be fantastic.
And Sophia, what are we going to do with the podcast this semester? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've got, I can't even remember if it's 5 or 6 podcasts, but I think it's that going through, reviewing what you've recorded and what you have. What is your constant content? Like, what links and is timeless and doesn't need a new intro? Doesn't need any recontextualizing or a new exit? And then making sure that you really are making it current. So if you can embed things that are happening in the world right now, if you can talk about the live, the here and now, then when the students are listening to the podcast, it really engages them. It's not dated. It's not, you're not talking about some event that happened 3 years ago. So I think that's really important. while there certainly may be elements that are timeless and are fantastic and you nailed it first time, I do think that there certainly is value in continuous improvement.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sophia. And thank you all very much for listening. I know we're pretty much on 22, Vin, so I don't want to push things back, but that's it from us. So thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure being here.
Thank you to all three of you for a really wonderful, nice, slick presentation that was very engaging and certainly of great interest. I might kick the ball down the road with the first question. In terms of, you talk about wanting to look at the impact now, and I think that's really, really exciting, and there are certainly lots of ways that you could do that. But in terms of, what do you think is the niche for this within a normal standalone unit of study that has the other things in it that we all know? What do you think this does differently? What is its real strength, do you think?
I reckon, for me, what really excites me about it is that students get to hear you talking and using discipline-specific language in a very different way than what they would normally. If I'm used to working in the science building, students come to the science building and they hear science conversations, they hear the lab technician talking about the OH&S, they hear all of that sciencey stuff going on from admin to staff to other students. In the online environment, that doesn't happen so much. And so the development of that kind of language skills, I think, is a really big gap. So for me, that's what excites me about it.
I think it's our ability to convey our passion as well. I think that's the thing that comes through. I think, and sometimes the thing that's lacking, certainly in the way that we were developing content, you know, sometimes you don't get to put enough of your own personality into it. And that's something in that online world that I think we all miss as teachers, being able to convey our passion for our interest areas. So that's, I think, the thing that podcasting can really capture too. Just having a look
at the team
through the chat. I'm just having, there's a few in the chat. Masita, we can certainly share. I haven't got access to some right at the moment, but I can certainly send a link to one of the episodes that Vin could potentially, I don't know, send out with the recording. We could absolutely do that. Just reading through the other questions. How do we ensure that they're listening? This was a really
investment.
Yeah. Great idea, Sophia. But to be honest, we didn't really have to. We didn't know how this was going to work. We sort of thought, well, we'll put it out there and we'll see if they listen. And I remember sending an email to these guys about 2 days after checking on Milo how many people had accessed it, and it was more than half within 2 days. And I said, this is extraordinary. We're onto something here. That they were just finding the time. The response and the speediness of the response was quite fascinating.
It comes back to that portability. If you can listen to it while you're walking, while you're working out at the gym, while you're cooking or caring, while you're cleaning the house, like that's something that you can fit in. It's really hard to listen to an academic paper or a textbook while you're doing those things, because you have to concentrate, and there's words and terms and you need to rewind and go back, and you want to read at the same time as you listen. But a conversation, that's easy. You are naturally attuned to listening to two people have a conversation.
Sure. And I think that sort of goes some way to answering your first question there, Joseph, where, you know, in an area where internet services are bad, reinvigorate traditional media like AM radio. To be perfectly frank, everything that we did, it literally harks back to late night AM radio talkback. I mean, that is the structure that we use. We borrowed very heavily. You know, I certainly in my head thought about, you know, the late night talkback radio that my grandmother used to always have on the wireless when I was a kid, because that's the sort of stuff that makes you feel like there's someone in the room with you. I think that's the other thing, even though it's just audio, I think it helps with isolation in a lot of ways, like some of that great talkback AM radio can do too. And we do have the guide, Vin. I can send you that. Yep. I've got that as a recording, so I can certainly send you that too. Yeah.
Well, thanks again to the team for a wonderful presentation. It's certainly got some great discussion going, and it's got me thinking about what I do in my unit. So thank you very much, team.
Thanks so much, Marshall, Sophia, and Richard. That's wonderful. It's really fascinating.
Pleasure.
Once again.
So we move on now please correct me if I've pronounced your name incorrectly. Hoti Mai Lin, is that correct?
Vinh.
Yeah, you say correct.
Lin.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lin. Developing the digital competencies of teachers through DigComp Edu framework, facilitating learners' digital competence competence. Lynn has a very interesting biography there. Currently, she is Vice Dean of the Faculty of Languages, International Cultures at Hosei University. And she's also currently pursuing her doctorate in educational management at Horizons University. We're very keen to hear what you have to share with us, Lynn, and looking forward to it very much. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Say good afternoon, everyone. I'm so sorry that I had to use the camera phone because my laptop, it doesn't work with the camera. So I will try to share the screen from my laptop to present to you on about very like urgent, great topics about the technology. So allow me to share my screen. I don't have the host to share the screen for
Mark,
my.
Sorry, Mark, it look like we are still viewing Mark's screen. So if Mark stops sharing, and then Lynn will be able to share her screen.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, Mark, are you still there?
You might just need to remove Mark from the meeting. That might be the quickest way to stop him sharing.
Oh no, that's so rude.
Or you go to the setting and allow for multiple sharing, so I can share over his screen.
I will make Lynn a co-host. So Lynn, I will make you co-host now, so you can share your screen.
Okay. So while waiting for the host to share the screen, I would love to thank you so much. All right. So still not yet.
I already make you a co-host, but Mark needs to stop sharing. How to do that if I'm a host?
How about I go and call him?
Yeah. Okay, I already stopped. Okay, then can you share your screen now?
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So you guys all see my screen, right?
We can see it now.
Yeah. So first of all, but before I share my work on about the digital competence of the student, of the teacher, I would love to say thank you so much for the organizer, for everyone to have to be here today. Let me a chance to share some of my work in my thesis for my PhD program. And this is just a small part in my PhD program thesis. I have to go over with the digital computer education framework for 6 different dimensions. But here I'm just focused on one thing I really interested in, to wonder why the students are able to use the computer like technology skill. How about they themselves able to manage their skill on over the internet, and what is the role of the teacher? So that's why my topic today is about developing the digital competence of a teacher through the digital competency education framework. and especially in facilitating learner digital competence. So there are some main parts in this will be include the introductions of the story of the thesis, and also will be problem statement. My purpose of the study, the research question, some theoretical framework, and method and data collection, and some finding, and explain a little bit finding and some recommendation. And try to speak not too much time, and we can go move on in discussion. So for the introduction, as you guys all know, we have to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. And not only in Australia, but everywhere in the world, they have to shut down because that COVID-19. And Vietnam school, Vietnamese government have to face with the problem. They have to switch everything online to let the student to continue their studying. And the research to try to examine how the Vietnamese English teacher, they understand about the digital teaching competencies to help the learner across some dimensions of the digital competency framework. And also I collect the data from 100 Vietnamese teachers and for a 20 teacher for the interview. And the reason why with the sample with 120 I will explain in my data collection methodology. And you guys all know that that like it's hard for the student to accept to learn online because they have really no experience to learn online back to the 2020, because some of the students, they do the hybrid learning by themselves on the online, but just not like compulsory. And teachers do online just for extra, not just really compulsory too. And when we switch everything online, that we got a big problem that parents and students, they don't want to participate in the online class. And besides that, the digital tool the teacher have to use, they have really no idea what they can do and how they can take the online more efficiently. So that's the reason why we have three main problems here that you can see on the screen. So my purpose of this study, I try to identify some teacher digital competency in general. So what are their level, what digital competency they are good at, and what they are not good at, and what we can do to improve their digital competence. And also try to understand a little bit about student understanding, whether they know much about digital competences and how they can help the learner in their own competence in digital. And also improve the learning online back to now, everything get back to normal, but still we do the hybrid for learning online and offline. So it's too important for the teacher to keep their student learning online through some activity they have to do kind of like half or compulsory during the course. They need to do some online class. And also enhance the student understanding about the digital competence in their online learning. So this is just a small research in my present. So I just like focus on two questions about the topics. What is the level of teacher competency in that area? Like it's focused on facilitate student learning and what the student understanding regarding to the use of technology to enhance their student learning. And by on that, the theoretical framework, I have four main parts. So maybe number one, number two, because of the time, I'm just showing you and go quickly for the theoretical framework. And I focus a little bit on number three and number four, that is the main part for my research and also my questionnaire and interview. So the number one will be the integrate computer technology in the language teaching. And number two, what is the digital competence and the teacher digital competence. So you guys can see that that is not a new term for Vietnamese school, for Vietnamese government, because back to the 19th century when everything is like supplied by the internet, everything get together ready to the flash world, and Vietnamese government still put a lot of effort to build up the platform for everyone can learn online. However, the number of the teacher and student they use online in the class is not really like high, and they not just only doesn't really know how to use it, but also they also here you can see they also need to like not only a technological skill, but also the digital learning is too different from that. We can see in the screen, they have two types of the learner. One is the asynchronous, that like they use the online discussion or digital library or the electronic document, or the one-to-one online in the real time using the digital application or platform like Zoom or Google Meet. And the second one is the one we are focusing on now, because back to the COVID-19, everything is switched online. They use the digital platform like Google Meet, Teams, or Microsoft Teams and Zoom to do their teaching. So the teacher digital competence, and here they got some researcher, they define the digital competence in the integrate and functional use of digital knowledge, skill, and attitude. Some of the teachers, when I do the interview, they didn't really understand what a digital competence. They just understand that's the technological skill for them to use the computer, some tools, some app on the internet, and then on their teaching through using the app or the application through the internet. But according to the Jensen's law, the digital competence have become really like increasingly, because that's not just only about digital technology, but it also about how to use the digital policy and initiative and help the learner. And also digital competency are described as the range of the skill that involve on the cognitive, emotion, and social skill. And teacher digital competence is a set of knowledge, skill, attitude required using the integration computer technology and digital media to perform the task, to build knowledge where the user area are confident, crucial, creative use. So that means that the teacher, they should not just like turn on the internet, find the document from the internet and try to use the handout or the game, and then they make into the class, but they have to get themselves knowledge, skill, and attitude when they use it, to make sure that the student, they have to know what it is about, and also whether it's good to use or how they can use it effectively, and how do they protect themselves during the using the information on the internet. So that's the reason why the teacher digital competence become very, very important. It's just like a set of ability, skill, knowledge that they can handle during the teaching online virtual classroom. And again, this is some factor that student teacher doesn't really want to do online. Find out some researcher, they talk about that all over the world. And in Vietnam, we still have the same problem. So I didn't list on the Vietnamese researchers about this one. The first one is the digital competencies framework. As you guys all know, the digital competency framework is designed by the record 2017. They include 22 competence in 6 different areas of the digital competence. And each digital competence area described to test the teacher whether they are good at the using the understanding, the ability or attitude, how they can help the learner, how they can manage their teaching through the digital world. So the first area, they focus on professional engagement. That means the teacher, they're using the digital world to develop their career. And the second one will be digital resources, how the teacher create, manage the information or resources through the internet, and how can they make it for themselves, and how what they can use and what the condition they need to know before they use the resources in their classroom. And the area 3 will be the teaching and learning. They are using the digital to have the teaching to guide them and to make the learner with collaborate, and also to have the learner to self-learning through this app and then the tool or the platform they use to make sure the learner, they are able to follow and to learn in the class. In the area 4 assessment, again, they are using some digital tool, or they have not the knowledge, attitude, and understanding how they use some tool strategy to assess the student, formative assessment or summative assessment, what they can do to give feedback and to plan for their learner. And the area 5 will be empower the learner. In this one, they have to get the student, they will be active, engaging learner. And then the last one will be the one that I focus more on, either how they can facilitate their learner digital computing. So everything have done through online, not just like learning new knowledge, but also then have to learning the new skill. And the work computing is higher than the skill because they need to get the student not just only understand, and I also had to be know what they communicate, how they communicate, and they have to use the content they are using on the internet to create, to manage, to modify, to make their learning better. And also they have to show the problem when they use these information or the tool to get their learner become a digital citizen. And so that's why this area that include 5 main parts of the computing, they have the learner to teacher will incorporate activity and assessment to help the learner to extract information need, and then to help the learner to find the information in the digital environment. They organize, analyze, and evaluate the information. For the digital communication and collaboration, they will incorporate the activity, assignment, assessment for learner to responsibility use digital technology for communication, collaboration. And for digital content, they have to incorporate activity, assignment, assessment to make or to create the content in various formats. And then teach your learner about the copyright license and reference. That means they have to know what's good to you, what not good to you. And ensure the learner to well-being while using the digital technology. That means to become a responsible user. And the problem solving have incorporating the some activity, develop the student problem solving, critical thinking, and then apply to create the diverse content. So this is the cry that teacher have to do during the class. And when they are using the activity that they incorporate the information in the digital world to help the learner not just only communicate, collaborate, criticize, and create, but also make the student to know how to become a responsive user. And based on the digital computing framework is the really great one framework, because, and you guys all know there are lots of framework all over the world, and researchers have to research about the digital computing. But I take the digital computing framework, digital computing educator framework, because they range the level of the user or the teacher from the beginner to the proficiency from A1 to C2. And this will similar or parallel with the common CEFR, nice common English reference framework for measure the student or teach student English level. And why? And in Vietnam, the MOAF and every single school, they get you to what this framework. They will know what level the students are at the beginner, what level the students are at the elementary, what can they do. So based on this level, I can measure whether the teacher, they are what level of this digital computing. And if they are the explorer or newcomer from the beginner elementary, they should develop basic pedagogy digital practice. That means they should use very little digital in their teaching. And most of the class in a very traditional way. And some of them just use a digital textbook, don't use a lot of like handout or game during the teaching time in the traditional classroom. If they are expert or integrator, they will explore digital technology. They will encourage the learner to use the digital technology. They also expand, integrate, and reflect on practice. While they're teaching, they can use some activity, let the student to write, maybe making the e-blog or write email or post on the Twitter or Facebook. And they have to take advantages of many different apps or the software that are free or that can let the student are able to use. But also in their classroom, they are able to use to show the authentic world with the student. If they are advanced and proficiency level, that means they enhance their teaching pedagogy practice, but they use the wide range of digital technology. And they also understand what they're good, what they need to improve, what they need to modify. They don't need to like copy exactly the same what they can find out on the internet, but they have to make for their own student with their own level. And So the study is using that, like I just shared, the study is using this one because we are get you to what the CEFR of the framework that the MOAD and more of the Vietnamese curriculum developing they are using. So the methodology, this one will be a case study for me to investigate about 100 Vietnamese teacher with a semi-final interview for the quality method with about 20. And it's allowed me to find out what they are good at, like what their level, and how they can use their digital computing to help their learner. So the participant inside the 100, it means I am working on the data for participant with a VUS, with Vietnam USA Social English Language Center, where during the pandemic they still using the online teaching. Most of the English language center in Vietnam or Ho Chi Minh City during that time they shut down. Then they don't really know what they can do and how they can do the online teaching. But VU at that time, they still survive. They do a lot of online teaching, like the normal class for the level of children, teenager, adult, but they also do some grammar. They also do some speaking activity class, like especially many different classes during the online. And the 100, that means I doing the research with the Canberra area, because VUS have about right now 63 centers in Vietnam, but Ho Chi Minh City, they have about 43 campuses. And the area campus in District 6 in Bình Tân with 4 main campus, I call A, B, C, D because of the confidential. And about 17,000 students enrolled for 43 campuses. So that is some requirement for the teacher. They need to have the English teaching degree. They teaching online during the pandemic to be the participant in this survey. And there will be about 12 Vietnamese teachers at the campus A, 16 campus B, 24 at campus C, 48 at campus D. This is the total Vietnamese teacher for each campus. And this is the number of the campus teacher, because the campus A kind of small one and B is small one in District 6. But campus C and D are twice as big. That means the number of the student, number of teachers are higher. And they are in the campus area of the VUS. So totally will be 100 Vietnamese teachers. And based on the 100 Vietnamese teachers, there are 20 of them in 4 different campuses are willing to join to the interview for the method that I collect the interview to open up more discussion of what they're thinking about the digital computer that I can collect through the survey or questionnaire. So the first part of my questionnaire, I will do the teaching background. So I will collect some information about their times of teaching, whether they have 1 or 3 years, 3 or 5 years, 5, 7 years, or more than 10 years. And the quantitative method with 20, I still do the same to see whether they have a higher experience or lower experience, and maybe my implication with some teachers have higher experience, they are good at using the digital or not. So that is my further research about this. And I using the digital computer educator framework checking questionnaire. So this framework, they already set up or design a questionnaire to measure the level of the user. And they are designed by the European Science Hub Department, and they will aim to identify the teacher digital competencies needs. And it was chosen based on some expert judgment. So that really presented. So it's good to measure the level. So I don't need to create one that not have any test by the framework department or the organization to make sure the computer is right level. And the digital computer educator framework is completed in a Google form. That the 3 main parts that I just explained. The first one will be the objectives of the frame, the survey, the teacher experience, and then the questionnaire concept of the 6 competency area. But then I just take the area number 6 to analyze and show the finding to you on. And the linker scale I use to each item ranging from 0, not at all, 1, not really, to sometimes 3 yes, and 4 yes. I do this comprehensively and starting with 0 up to 4. And this is on the area that I have mentioned in the 22 item in the digital competency educator framework. Now I focus on the area 6. So you can see that the area 6 will consist of 5 different items. Like I have presented, that will be about the literacy. So they will focus on how the teacher can teach the student to assess the reliability of information and identify the misinformation. Or the teacher will set up the assignment to require the student to use the digital means to communicate, to collaborate, or the setup assignment that teacher have to let the student create content using the digital, like video, audio, photo, and I teach the student how to behave safely and responsibly online. And the last one, encourage the student to use digital technology creatively to solve the concrete problem. And this will be collected and then counted by the point. So this put the 22 items in 6 areas of the framework. If the teacher, they are reading on 80 points, they will be C2 level, and in 19 point A1 level. With the area 6, if they are answer 5 item marking from 13 to 16 will be 2, and 17 to 19 will see 1, and then the C2 will be 20. And this will be based on the result in the digital competent educator check-in result, not the one that like we are able to create. So here, the data collection for the quality method, I will do the semi-structure in deep interview with open-ended question, and there about 8 questions. But for the area 6, I just focus on two questions that connect with the problem that they may face with during being the student in their digital learning. And I will conduct the interview in Vietnamese because I think that the translation of the participant thoughts to another language, while the interview can make them limited the word and then sharing straightforward on the idea or thing they want to share. And the thematic analysis will be used to make sure that I can identify, analyze, and report the pattern within the data that I use. And in 2 open questions, the online-offline teaching differences and online teaching problem and challenges. And so here the result. With all 6 domains, I'm finding out that more surprisingly, they have no experience with teaching online before the pandemic, but after the collection on the data, the level they are get with all 100 teachers at the B2 level, that means they are the expert. They're able to use the digital technology, able to use, they know the technology, they know the digital knowledge, they have the learner, they build the learner collaboration or communication through the online very effectively. And by 4 campuses, the campus with the B2 level here is the campus A, which is really high, or like more than 50% of teachers on this campus, they are the expert. Maybe because the campus A is small campus, so it's easy to measure than the bigger one. And for the area 6, that you can see that for the total will be they are the B1 level. B1 level integrator, that means as I share, they are able to integrate the digital technology into the teaching, helping the learner to facilitate their learning. And for the campus that reach that high level is campus B. Yeah. And some for each item in the area 6, for example, information and media literacy, that's surprisingly that 41% of the teacher just occasionally remind. So that means they remind the student online is not reliable, but still they do remind the student how to understand the information, how to know what is use the information. for the digital communication and collaboration is 35% of the teacher, they let the student to do the communication or collaboration in among each other using the tool. Yeah, and also outside the class, they also use another tool to communicate. So it kind of like good for the communication and collaboration. The digital in this during this time, I think this item is not surprising me much because everyone Gen Z or Gen E or Gen Z in X, they are using the iPhone or technology on email or chat. They usually communicate and collaborate when they're working together. So the teacher, they just take advantage of the app to help the learner can learn better. And for the content creation, a teacher are actually using a lot what that's for the diversion and motivation. They use many different kinds of like activity, like video, audio, photo. So they are not stick on one. They making the various activity for the student, and they also have the learner to know that they have to be careful with their personal information when they're using the online information. So they need to be careful. So 37% of the teacher remind inform the student to behave safely and responsibly online. The last one, the digital problem solving. And this one, you can see that like whenever the problem comes, the teacher try to take problem and have the learner to think about a problem, try to improve their problem solving skill. So problem solving skill is not like a new thing during the normal time, but back to the online time, it become maybe like more urgently because they know how to help the learner during that time to face with some stress, some loneliness, and some problem they can face with their family if anyone their family have COVID. So whenever problem, and then they will share or teacher imply the problem during the class activity to help the learner can improve, and then can use to share, to talk, or to post something about that can help you get better. So I think the activity the teacher can use to create, to show some problem, to obstacle problem, it kind of like popular and a lot of teachers use it. So it's not surprisingly the 48% of teachers doing that. And for the quantity, the two questions that I asked them, and then they will about like they are thinking like the teachers and online offline problem or differences because the interaction. Even though now we are interact through the screen, but the face-to-face and the online interaction definitely are not the same. Sometimes you misunderstand your audience, sometimes you misunderstand your learner or your teacher when you're doing the online, not just like face-to-face. And the problem that amounts of the ICTU, that means they don't really know how to use it on the time or no different. Some 2% said they're no different because they usually to do it online class. And then another problem and challenges that they think that like the student, they don't really know how to use the technology. They don't really good at the technology, especially with a younger learner. When it's the first time for them to learn, they may have problem to handle the app or the game when the teacher switch to another app or game on the screen, or maybe they don't have the device because they never have learned online before, and at home they just have the computer or their parent had to use it and they have no iPad, they just use a small phone. So it's really hard for them. And sometimes that's difficult for the teacher to try to have the student pay attention to catch up their motivation during their class. And so based on that, on the result, that means I can share with you on, there are no doubt that the teacher, Vietnamese teacher, they definitely have their pedagogic digital competence. It's kind of high level too, but there are diversity, the areas of the digital competence framework, not just like the stable and the same, some up and some down. For example, with the assessment, they are not really high level, or with their professional development, they are not really high level either. And then it kind of surprising me, like 39% of the teacher, they are at the B2 level, which means they are good at facilitate the learner digital competence. They are helping their learner not to only learn the lesson, but also improve their learning skills through the screen, or some technology skills, some digital understand about the world online, and some information they need to protect and safely and responsibly use. And based on the analyze, that will be clear teacher perception of the digital competence as still limited, and particularly for the online classroom. And then this is some training for the teacher. Like after this one, we recommend the school administrator need to like organize more professional development, workshop sharing, help the learner get ready with the online, update new technology, how they can use it, and then gather together, reflect what is good to you, this one, what is good, not good to you, and how the student they handle if they are the learner, and are able the, and then the teacher who are not fully aware of about digital competence, they may need to know what are good at the digital skill, not just only the digital skill, but also for the whole new world. They need to take advantages of learning the digital skill they have, but also make it more in the competence. And for the limitation, this one, because we just use but my center, and it kind of hard for the research to do during the online pandemic time. It's hard for me to do the interview, because back to that time we have to do online, so it arrange time to do harder. But then getting the student attention online is not easy, and then online student teacher integration is one of the things that like teacher need to focus on. And back to the new normal, everything get back to normal, we still try to use the hybrid mode or blended learning. That means the online offline to get the student get ready, get used to with online. And if everything get worse one again, we have thing is ready. And there's some training core for the digital competence training core for the trainer or the trainee. Like they have to plan out what they can do for the teacher. And as school for trainee teacher, they need to include the technology material developing or the digital competence developing into the curriculum. Can help the learner, can help the trainer to get ready with this. And also they need to get the teacher get more practice of using these things. And foster the motivation, and also for the student stimulation. And also for the foster the student motivation and stimulation that need to facilitate learner and then more accommodate the different learner style, communication with lesson material. And it's strongly recommended on the student research. They have to do require all the things the same, and the tool for the interaction during the class. And students in online class, they should have to by themselves interact with the other during the class time. And so that's all for my sharing. And I would love to hear some comment and then question. And thanks again for your participant listening, and thanks again for your attention.
Thanks very much, Lynn, and for a fascinating presentation of your doctoral research there. Fantastic, congratulations. I'll start the ball rolling. I'm very interested in thematic analysis and thematic inductive analysis. Did you, when you were analysing your qualitative data, did you use something like NVivo, or did you use your own spreadsheets and word count and that kind of thing? What was your approach to your thematic analysis, Lynn?
Thank you, Doctor. When I collect on the data, I have to use the SPSS to analyze the data to see whether the data is reliable or is validity. So with the SPSS, they can come up with some means, some errors, and based on this, I will give some information about my data, whether that I can use it, because it's 100 like participant is not a lot for me to analyze with a big picture for the teacher competency level. So I have to make it more clear and persuade why with 100 I can do a clear picture for this area campus, and when I apply for the other campuses with like 4 or 6 different campuses with bigger participants will be the same or different. But because the limit of time, I don't do much about the comparison between 2 campuses or 2 campus area to see whether my data analysis is valid and reliable. So that is for my future research.
Thanks, Lynn. Are there questions for Lynn now, please?
Thanks very much, Lynn, for your really fascinating presentation. I just had a question about the student instead. I mean, I know you investigated teachers at a foreign language center. I was so curious about the learners, whether they are children or adults, and what are their levels. Just out of my curiosity, because I know language centers offers a lot of courses, and I was interested in knowing more about students' level.
Thank you, Dr. Lin. Actually, when I do this research, it focuses on the teacher at the English language center. That means they have to conduct their teaching like in the children class, teenager class, and adult. And then we will have to find out, it's for my future research to find out what like age, what level of the student they are using more digital than the other. But overall, with the learner, I just to assume that will be the total student that the teacher do. I just focus on the teacher competence, whether they do every single class, they will do the same, or they just like celebrate. But then thanks for that. That can be good for my future research to analyze whether they are different for the teacher, technology or digital competence for each different kind of learner.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other queries for Lynn and her wonderful research? I'll hand back to you then, Vin. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Bill, for sharing the 2 sessions today. Zee, you're joining us this afternoon, and you are an expert in technologies. I was wondering if you had any question for Lynn. No? Okay, that's fine.
Hi, Win. Thank you so much for having me here. I must say that at the first part of the session, I was driving, so I was trying to follow as much as I could. But at the last part of the session, I especially like how some of the recommendations suggested by Lynn, if I pronounced your name correctly, Lynn. And especially from the digital literacy and digital technologies perspective, and I especially agree with the perspective that if I describe this correctly, that it is often quite an issue for the teachers to assume that doing digital technologies stuff is just doing it virtually, which can be a problem. So such a confusion would be a work in progress that many of the educators would be spending some time to work on it, I suppose, if that's the right way to say it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zee. I guess that if in the future that you are interested in the technology and work on some more research about the digital, I would love to send me the email. I'm willing to participate and I'm willing to take to research more about that. And again,
Absolutely.
It's hard for the teacher or Vietnamese teacher and student during this time. Again, they are not really willing to do the online class because they still favor one-to-one, face-to-face learning. So their skill is just still limited in some technological skill, not just for learning. So in the future, if we can have a guidebook or maybe a deeper research for how they can help the learner to maybe stimulate and motivate and enhance their learning autonomy during the digital world. That would be wonderful.
Sounds very good, Lynn. And I suppose things are moving so quickly, so rapidly in the digital technologies or the digital literacy space. So it is a work in progress.
Excellent answer, Lynn, and thank you very much for the question, Z. And I think we have one more question, and that's to end the session beautifully. Nhật Minh asked a question about whether or not the teachers are required to grow their level of teaching online when they apply for job at those centers.
Thank you for the question. And the teaching online is just like a kind of like a showing problem during the pandemic, and back to now everything is get back to normal. So they do the one-to-one offline. So if you have the teaching degree or bachelor degree and some TESOL certificate, you can apply for my center. And then during that, they have the professional development plan to help you with some online teaching, like maybe helping the teacher with more digital skill for you to get ready whenever they do the online, you can able to take the online class.
Okay, wonderful. Oh, thank you so much, everyone. It's just a wonderful afternoon again for the Australia-ASEAN Academics Forum. Thank you so much to all the 4 fantastic presentation presenters today. Mark, Sophie, Bridget, and Lynn from Vietnam. And thank you so much to my amazing colleague Bill for your talents in sharing as always. And thank you to my colleagues from Brunei, Masita. She attended every single session. And thanks so much, Greg. He's attended a lot of sessions as well. Z today, Manan, Joseph, Hostel Wahida, City, Lê Xuân He from Hanoi, Vietnam, Churanda, and Imar. So thanks so much to all of you and have a good evening. And I will be in touch again tomorrow. Bye-bye, everyone.